Have you ever trusted the one person who shares your DNA, only to realize they orchestrated your absolute ruin for social media clout? Carolyn walked into a 5-star restaurant, hoping for genuine romance, completely unaware her identical twin sister had set up a humiliating blind date to broadcast to millions of followers. But her cruel sister failed to account for the quiet, lethal man sitting at the adjacent table. A Mafia boss didn't just stop the joke. He violently rewrote the punchline. Rain lashed against the foggy windowpane of Carolyn Abernathy's modest downtown apartment, blurring the neon streetlights into streaks of electric blue and crimson. She stood before her full-length mirror, her hands trembling as she smoothed the fabric of her emerald-green wrap dress. At 260 pounds, Carolyn had spent most of her 26 years navigating a world that constantly reminded her she took up too much space. Society had conditioned her to apologize for her body, to hide in oversized sweaters and dark, receding colors. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, she wanted to be seen. Her identical twin sister, Cleo, had convinced her to take a chance. Genetically, they were a medical anomaly. While they shared the same bone structure, the same striking hazel eyes, and the same rich chestnut hair. That was where the similarities abruptly ended. Cleo was a size 2, a fiercely ambitious lifestyle influencer with over 3 million followers on Instagram. Cleo lived her life in curated filters, designer sponsorships, and absolute vanity. Carolyn, on the other hand, battled severe polycystic ovary syndrome, working as a quiet, dedicated accountant for a local logistics firm. For years, Cleo had treated Carolyn like a tragic charity case at best, and a convenient stepping stone at worst. Yet earlier that week, Cleo had called with an unusually sweet tone, promising she had met the perfect man for her sister. "He's tired of superficial city girls, Chloe," Cleo had purred through the phone line. "His name is Jason. He's a junior partner at a hedge fund, and he explicitly told me he loves women with curves. Just go. Let yourself be happy for once." Carolyn desperately wanted to believe her. Deep down, beneath the layers of self-doubt, she craved companionship. She applied a bold red lipstick, took a deep, shuddering breath, and grabbed her umbrella. 30 minutes later, the taxi pulled up to Laura, one of the most exclusive and notoriously pretentious restaurants in the city's financial district. The moment Carolyn stepped through the heavy revolving doors, the atmosphere shifted. The dining room was a sea of crystal chandeliers, velvet booths, and patrons who looked like they stepped out of luxury fashion magazines. As she approached the host stand, the sharply dressed maitre d' swept his gaze over her. The microaggression was subtle, a slight tightening of the lips, a raised brow, but Carolyn felt the familiar sting of silent judgment. "Reservation for Abernathy," Carolyn said, her voice betraying a slight quiver. "Ah, yes. The gentleman is already waiting at table 4. Carolyn navigated through the maze of tables, acutely aware of the space she occupied. Then she saw him. Jason Caldwell was objectively handsome in a sterile, corporate way. He had slicked-back blonde hair, a sharp jawline, and an expensive navy suit tailored to perfection. He was nursing a scotch, his thumbs flying across the screen of his smartphone. "Jason?" she asked softly. He looked up, and for a fraction of a second, an unrecognizable expression flashed in his pale blue eyes. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't attraction. It looked frighteningly like predatory amusement. "Carolyn." "Wow, you're exactly as your sister described." He stood up, a performative gesture of chivalry, and gestured for her to sit. "Thank you for doing this," Carolyn said, sliding into the plush velvet booth. She placed her clutch on the table, trying to calm her racing heart. "Cleo speaks very highly of you." "Cleo is a genius," Jason replied, his lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. He casually propped his smartphone against the sleek metallic base of a tabletop wine cooler, the screen facing them. "She really knows how to put on a show." Carolyn frowned, slightly confused by the phrasing, but she brushed it off, eager to make a good impression. "So Cleo mentioned you work in finance?" For the next 20 minutes, the conversation dragged on, punctuated by Jason's bizarre, passive-aggressive remarks. When the waiter arrived to take their order, Carolyn nervously eyed the menu. Before she could speak, Jason intervened. "I'll have the 20-ounce dry-aged ribeye, rare," Jason told the waiter. "And the lady will have the house salad, no croutons, dressing on the side. We're watching our waistlines tonight." Carolyn froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her flushed with profound embarrassment. The waiter looked incredibly uncomfortable, but nodded and hastily retreated. "Excuse me," Carolyn whispered, her voice tight. "I didn't agree to that." "Come on, Carolyn," Jason chuckled, leaning back in his chair and picking up his drink. "I'm just looking out for you. Your sister said you had a great sense of humor. Don't be so sensitive. Besides, the internet loves a good health journey." "The internet?" Carolyn echoed, her chest tightening with an icy grip of panic. Jason tapped the back of his phone, which was still perfectly angled toward them. "Yeah, smile, babe. You're live on Cleo's private subscriber channel. We're doing a social experiment. It's called Will the Whale Eat the Bait? Currently, 35,000 people are watching." The room seemed to spin. The soft jazz playing through the overhead speakers morphed into a deafening roar in Carolyn's ears. She looked at the phone. The little red light was glowing. Her twin sister, her own flesh and blood, had orchestrated this entire evening just to broadcast her humiliation to an audience of paying subscribers. Cleo had weaponized Carolyn's deepest insecurities for engagement metrics. "You're disgusting," Carolyn breathed out, tears violently stinging the corners of her eyes. She grabbed her clutch and tried to slide out of the booth, but Jason was faster. He reached across the table, his hand clamping down on her wrist with bruising force. "Hold on, the show isn't over. We need the dramatic exit. Let me read some of these comments first." He squinted at the screen. "User hate to see," it says. "Did she actually think a guy like him would want a pig like her?" Oh, and Cleo just pinned a comment. "Your sister says, 'Told you guys she'd fall for it.'" Carolyn pulled against his grip, a sob tearing from her throat. "Let me go." "Sit down, Shamu," Jason hissed, dropping his charming facade completely, his voice dripping with venom. "You're ruining the framing." What neither Jason nor Carolyn realized was that the cruel spectacle had captured the attention of the man sitting in the secluded corner booth directly behind them. And that man was not someone who tolerated disrespect. Leonardo Leo Moretti did not come to Laura for the dry-aged steak. As the head of the most formidable syndicate operating on the East Coast, Leo used the restaurant's quiet, dimly lit corners to conduct discreet business. At 34, Leo was a terrifyingly handsome man. He possessed sharp, patrician features, dark olive skin, and eyes the color of cold obsidian. Impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal three-piece suit, he radiated a quiet, suppressed violence that caused wise men to look away when he walked into a room. He was currently seated across from his underboss, a hulking man named Roberto, discussing a shipment of untaxed imports at the docks. However, for the last 10 minutes, Leo's focus had drifted. His sharp hearing, had zeroed in on the table next to theirs. Leo lived by an ancient, unyielding code. He was a man of the shadows, dealing in extortion, smuggling, and leverage. He was no saint, but he harbored a deep, visceral hatred for those who punched down. Bullying the defenseless was a weakness, the mark of a coward. He had watched the woman in the green dress arrive. He noticed the way she nervously adjusted her clothing, recognized the vulnerability in her eyes, and contrary to the shallow societal standards, Leo found her undeniably striking. Her lush curves, her porcelain skin, and her thick, cascading dark hair were beautiful. But it was the gentle, hopeful way she spoke that had caught his attention. Then he heard the man. He heard the order for the salad. He saw the phone propped against the wine cooler. He listened as the arrogant frat boy type dropped the charming act and revealed the live stream. When Jason clamped his hand over Carolyn's wrist and called her a pig, the temperature in Leo's corner of the room seemed to drop below freezing. Roberto, noticing his boss's deadly silence, stopped mid-sentence. "Boss, we have a problem." Leo didn't answer. He slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket, folded his linen napkin, and placed it neatly on the table. "I despise vermin, Roberto," Leo murmured smoothly, "especially loud ones." At table 4, Carolyn was frantically trying to pry Jason's fingers off her arm. The humiliation was an agonizing physical weight crushing her chest. The other patrons in the restaurant were beginning to stare, whispering behind their wine glasses, but no one intervened. They simply watched her drown. "I said sit down," Jason growled, squeezing tighter. "We have to hit 50,000 viewers before I dump you. That was the deal I made with Cleo." Suddenly, a large, deeply tanned hand reached down and gripped Jason's wrist. The grip was not just firm, it was mechanically devastating. Jason gasped, his eyes flying wide open as the pressure instantly ground his bones together. He released Carolyn with a yelp of pain, his head whipping around to glare at the intruder. "What the hell is your problem, man? Let go of me!" Jason spat, though his bravado wavered as he looked up into Leo Moretti's dead black eyes. "You are causing a scene," Leo stated. His voice was not loud. It was a smooth, low baritone, laced with a heavy Italian accent, but it carried the weight of a judge passing an execution order. "I'm filming a stream. Mind your own business." Jason tried to yank his arm back, but Leo's grip only tightened, eliciting a pathetic, high-pitched whimper from the finance bro. Carolyn sat frozen, her hand cradling her bruised wrist. She stared up at the towering man who had materialized out of thin air. He looked like an angel of death wearing a Rolex. Leo ignored Jason struggling. With his free hand, he calmly reached over and picked up the smartphone. He looked at the screen, watching the endless stream of cruel comments scrolling by, fueled by Carolyn's twin sister. Disgust curled the corner of his mouth. "Hey, put that down. That's an expensive—" Leo didn't blink. He